"Don't stop," the Apache girl whispered. The rancher heard it wrong, and that single moment would echo far beyond the night it was spoken. The sun was slipping low behind the jagged Arizona hills, spilling long bands of gold across the wide stretch of Dry Creek land. Shadows stretched thin and quiet over the open range, where Cole Maddox, a man carved by years and weather, stood resting one arm against a fence post, watching the Maddox herd drift lazily through the dying light. Time had taught him more than books ever could. He knew how the wind spoke before a storm, how the earth shifted beneath dry seasons, how cattle moved when something unseen unsettled them. This ranch wasn't just where he worked. It was who he was, a rhythm worn into his bones, sunrise to sunset. No shortcuts, no illusions, just sweat, patience, and the kind of honesty a man could live with. And Cole preferred it that way. Out here, solitude wasn't unusual. It was expected. The nearest town sat miles off, and folks like Hank Miller were scattered thin across the land. Most days, Cole welcomed the silence. There was peace in it. The wind threading through canyon walls, hawks crying somewhere high above, mesquite leaves whispering against one another. Those were sounds he trusted. Predictable, steady, safe. But that evening felt different. Something subtle shifted in the air, like a ripple across still water. Down the dusty road, a lone figure moved toward the ranch. Ayanna, a young woman from the Red Sky people, walked with steady steps, her presence quiet but unmistakable. She'd come to visit Martha Boone and Jed Turner, her kin not far from Cole's land. But curiosity had carried her further than she'd planned. She had been raised on stories of strength, survival, and a bond with the land deeper than words. That heritage showed in the way she carried herself. Calm, certain, rooted. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple braid, and her eyes, sharp, watchful, held both resolve and a quiet wonder for the world beyond what she knew. When she first saw Cole, she slowed. He stood tall, broad through the shoulders, moving with the natural ease of a man who had spent a lifetime under open sky. His hands were rough, worn from labor. His face carried the marks of sun and wind, and his gaze, always scanning, always measuring, spoke of someone who never stopped paying attention. There was something solid about him, grounded, like the land itself. Ayanna felt a flicker of interest. She had crossed paths with many people before, but not many who seemed so bound to the life they lived. Cole, unaware of her presence, was working the fence line. Years of storms, and worse, shifting ground, had taught him that even the smallest break could turn into a full-blown mess for the herd. He bent slightly, checking a loose post. Then something in the corner of his eye moved. He turned, expecting maybe a stray dog or one of Tommy Hale's kids wandering too far again. Instead, he found her. For a second, neither spoke. The air held a quiet tension, not sharp, not uneasy, just unexpected. Ayanna gave a small nod. Cole returned it, surprised, but not unkind. It wasn't often anyone came this far off the road. He wondered what had brought her. "I hope I'm not intruding," Ayanna said, her voice soft but steady. "I was just curious. I've never seen a ranch up close before." Cole straightened, dusting off his hands. "You're all right," he said. "Don't get many folks out this way." He paused a beat. "Name's Cole Maddox. This here's my place." "Ayanna," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm staying nearby with family. I've always wondered what life's like out here, away from the Dustfall folk." Cole studied her a moment longer. There was something different about her. She wasn't just looking, she was trying to understand. That was rare. Most folks imagined ranch life as something out of a painted postcard. Horses, open land, easy rides. They didn't see the work behind it, the grit, the discipline, the patience it demanded. "Well," Cole said, stepping aside, "you picked the right place to see the real thing. But it ain't pretty work." He gave a slight smirk. "Come on, I'll show you around, but don't expect anything fancy." Ayanna nodded, almost eager. Together they walked toward the barn. The air carried the thick scent of hay, worn leather, and livestock. Inside, Cole showed her the cows still being milked, explaining each step with quiet precision. Ayanna listened closely, asking questions that went beyond surface curiosity. She wanted to know how it all fit together. The land, the animals, the choices a man had to make day in and day out. As they moved across the ranch, Cole found himself watching her more than he expected. She didn't hesitate, didn't shy away from mud or muscle work. She stepped in close to the animals with a natural ease, treating them with a quiet respect that told him she understood more than she let on. She wasn't just observing, she was learning. And that impressed him. He'd seen plenty of visitors pass through, but none quite like her. Someone who paid attention, someone who cared. And though neither of them said it out loud, something had already begun to shift. There was a kind of respect in the way Ayanna moved among the Maddox herd. Not forced, not cautious, but instinctive. She understood distance, knew when to step in and when to hold back. It was quiet, almost unspoken. But it was there. And Cole noticed. He found himself impressed. Over the years, he'd seen plenty of folks pass through. Curious eyes, idle questions. But very few had ever paid this kind of attention. Fewer still had shown the care she did. By the time the last of the sun slipped below the horizon, the sky had deepened into shades of burnt orange and violet, and the first stars began to prick through the fading light. Cole and Ayanna stood side by side on a low rise overlooking the pasture. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and grass, mixed faintly with smoke drifting in from somewhere near Hank Miller's place. It was the kind of evening that settled deep in a man's chest, the kind that reminded Cole exactly why he had chosen this life. And for the first time in a long while, he realized something unexpected. Sharing it, even just for a moment, felt right. Ayanna stood quietly, her gaze stretched across the open land. She had heard stories of the West all her life, tales of endless sky, harsh deserts, and winding canyons. But standing here now, seeing it with her own eyes, it was something else entirely. It wasn't just how wide the land was, it was what it demanded. Attention, respect, responsibility. And somehow, without warning, she felt tied to it, like it had been waiting for her to notice it all along. As night settled in, Cole offered her something simple to eat inside the barn. They sat on worn wooden stools, sharing bread, cheese, and dried fruit beneath the dim lantern light. Conversation came easy. No strain, no pretense. They spoke of work first, of cattle, fences, seasons, but soon drifted into something deeper. Cole listened as Ayanna spoke about the Red Sky people, about the teachings of the Stone Elders, and the quiet strength carried through her Red Sky families. There was pride in her voice, but also something steady, something rooted. In return, she learned about the weight Cole carried each day. The long stretches of solitude, the responsibility of keeping the ranch alive against weather, time, and hardship. And beneath it all, the quiet pride he never spoke too loudly about. Somewhere in those shared words, something began to form. Not loud, not obvious, just understood. They were different, no denying that. Different paths, different worlds. but the ground beneath those differences felt strangely familiar. Respect for the land, work done with purpose, a need to live a life that meant something. Neither of them pushed it further than that. They didn't have to. The connection didn't come from words. It grew from simply being there, together. By the time the night had fully settled, the sky overhead was thick with stars. Ayanna stood, brushing the dust from her clothes. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes catching the starlight. "For showing me all this. It's more than I imagined." Cole gave a slow nod. "Glad someone sees it," he said. "Most folks only catch the surface. They don't see the work behind it." Ayanna smiled, just a little, a hint of something playful in her expression. "Maybe next time I won't just watch. Maybe I'll help." Cole let out a quiet chuckle. "We'll see," he said. "This life's got a way of testing people, but you might just surprise me." She turned and started down the dirt path, her figure slowly fading into the dark. Cole stood there a while longer, watching until she was gone. Something settled in his chest, something unfamiliar. Not discomfort, not quite peace either. Something in between, curiosity, respect, maybe more than that. For years, he had lived out here alone, trusting only what he knew, routine, land, silence. But tonight had stirred something, a reminder that the world didn't end at his fence line, that sometimes something new could walk right into your life without warning. Later that night, inside his small cabin, with the wind whispering through the trees, Cole lay awake longer than usual, thinking about her, about the way she moved, the way she spoke, the strength she carried without ever needing to prove it. The ranch had always been enough. Steady, predictable, safe. But now, for the first time in years, he realized maybe there was still more to learn. And somewhere beneath the same wide sky, Ayanna lay awake as well, thinking about the ranch, about the man who had opened his world to her, even just a little, and about that quiet, unexpected feeling that something had begun, something neither of them could quite name yet. She could feel it deep down. Something had shifted, not loud, not obvious, but real. Ayanna knew her visit had left a mark, though she couldn't quite name it. There was a quiet sense, unspoken but undeniable, that something had begun that night, something neither she nor Cole fully understood yet. What they didn't know was that the calm of that evening was only the beginning, because what lay ahead would test more than strength. It would test judgment. It would test trust. And it would change both of them in ways neither could have ever seen coming. That fragile thread of curiosity and respect had already been set in place, waiting for the right moment to be pulled tight. And somewhere beneath the endless stretch of desert sky, in the stillness of the night, both Cole Maddox and Ayanna drifted into sleep, unaware that the next night would stay with them for the rest of their lives. A night that would reveal just how powerful words could be, how dangerous assumptions were, and how much it mattered to truly listen before deciding what something meant. The next morning rose like any other across Dry Creek land. The sun crept slowly over the horizon, spilling soft gold across the rolling hills. Cole was already up, moving along the fence lines, checking posts, keeping an eye on the Maddox herd as they grazed in the early light. The air was calm. Birds called out from the distance. Cattle shifted lazily through the pasture. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Because Cole carried something with him that morning, a memory. Ayanna. He caught himself thinking about her more than once, her steady hands, her sharp eyes, the quiet confidence she carried without needing to prove it. Not many people stepped into his world the way she had. Open, unafraid of the work, the dust, or the weight of it all. And somehow, she'd stayed on his mind, like an echo that wouldn't fade. Across the way, at Martha Boone and Jed Turner's place, Ayanna had started her day as she always did. But her thoughts weren't where they should have been. They kept drifting back to the ranch, to the open fields, to the smell of hay and cattle, to the way Cole had explained everything, patient, careful, honest. She could still see it all clearly. And more than that, she wanted to go back. The idea of returning, of helping, of being part of that rhythm, pulled at her stronger than she expected. There was something about that place that felt right, different from anything she had known growing up with the Red Sky people, but not separate from it. Connected, somehow. By midday, the sky began to turn. Slow at first, then certain. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, thick, heavy, carrying the kind of weight that didn't need explaining. Cole saw it immediately. Years on this land had taught him to read the sky like a warning. The wind shifted. Cooler. Sharper. Rain was coming. Fast. He didn't waste a second. He moved quick, securing gates, tightening fence lines, pushing the Maddox herd toward the barns. The ranch, calm just hours before, now felt like it was bracing itself, waiting for impact. Out on a nearby trail, Ayanna saw it too. The sky darkened overhead. The wind picked up, tugging at her braid, cutting through the air with a sudden edge. She knew what this meant. Storms out here didn't wait. They didn't give second chances. Without hesitation, she turned back toward the ranch. She didn't think about whether she was expected. She didn't ask. She just knew. They'd need help. By the time she reached the property, the wind had already started tearing across the land. She spotted Cole near the fence line, struggling to force a gate back into place as it rattled under the pressure. The cattle were uneasy now, shifting, lowing, sensing what was coming. Cole's jaw was set tight, focused. But there was something else in his eyes, too. Urgency. He didn't have time to do this alone. "Cole," Ayanna called, her voice cutting through the rising wind as she ran toward him. "You need a hand?" He turned, caught off guard. "Ayanna?" he shouted back. "Didn't expect you. This ain't safe. You shouldn't be out here. I've got it." But she didn't slow down. Didn't argue. Didn't wait. She grabbed a rope and moved past him without hesitation, heading straight toward a young calf that had broken away from the herd. Little Rusty. The calf stumbled in the slick dirt, legs unsteady, panic in its movements. Ayanna approached carefully. Slow, controlled, her voice low, her movements steady. The calf began to calm. Cole watched just for a second, surprised by how fearless she was. Then the sky cracked open. Lightning tore across the horizon, and the storm came down harder than either of them had expected. Rain slammed into the earth in heavy sheets, turning dry ground into thick mud within moments. Thunder rolled across the hills like it was shaking the land itself. Within seconds, they were soaked. But neither of them stopped. There was no time. They moved together, driving the Maddox herd toward shelter, forcing gates shut, pulling animals out of danger. The wind ripped at their clothes, whipped through their hair, but they kept going. Because out here, every second mattered. And stopping wasn't an option. At one point, Cole spotted trouble. Near the fence line, a small calf, Little Rusty, was caught fast between the wooden slats, its leg twisted awkwardly as it thrashed in panic. The animal let out sharp, frightened cries, fighting against something it couldn't break free from. Ayana moved before he even spoke. "Don't stop," she urged, her voice low but urgent, guiding Cole as he dropped to his knees and tried to work the calf loose. But something in her tone, soft, close, intense, hit him wrong. Cole's heart stuttered. For a split second, his mind drifted somewhere it shouldn't have. The words twisted in his head, sounding like something personal, something meant for him, not the moment. He hesitated. Just for a second. Confusion flickered across his face as he froze, unsure what she meant. Ayana caught it instantly. A slight frown crossed her features, but she didn't slow down. "Hurry! It's Leg!" she snapped, her voice cutting clean through the roar of the Black Ridge storm. That snapped him back. Cole shook it off hard, jaw tightening as he forced his focus where it belonged. Together they worked fast, hands slipping in mud and rain, until finally the calf came loose. They guided little Rusty into the barn, the animal trembling but unharmed. Ayana crouched beside it, running a steady hand along its neck, whispering softly until it calmed. Outside, the storm still raged. Rain hammered against the barn roof like gunfire. Lightning split the sky, flashing through the cracks in the wood. Wind howled through every gap, and thunder rolled so deep it felt like the ground itself was shaking. But inside, they kept working. Soaked, mud-covered, exhausted. Neither of them stopped. They moved together without needing to speak, closing gates, securing stalls, guiding the rest of the Maddox herd to safety. Every movement came from instinct, urgency, and something else, something shared. Even in the chaos, a strange understanding took hold. A glance here, a gesture there, short words, no wasted breath. Cole found himself trusting her, her instincts, her speed, the way she read the moment, and Ayana, in turn, leaned on his experience, his knowledge of the land and the animals. They didn't question it. They just worked. And together, they got every last animal inside. The storm pushed them to their limits, testing strength, patience, and nerve. Then, slowly, it began to ease. The rain softened. The wind lost its bite. What had felt endless finally started to pass. The barn stood firm, battered but holding. The Maddox herd was safe, and both of them, soaked through, streaked with mud, were running on nothing but what little strength they had left. They leaned back against the rough wooden beams, breathing hard, letting the silence settle around them. Water dripped from the rafters. Cattle shifted and lowed softly. Thunder rumbled faint in the distance, moving farther away. For a few long moments, neither of them spoke. Then Cole turned his head, looking at her. Mud streaked across Ayana's face. Her hair clung wet against her skin. But her eyes, steady, sharp, unshaken, still carried that same fire. And something in his chest shifted. Respect. Deep. Earned. "I misread you," Cole said quietly, still catching his breath. "Back there. I thought—" He stopped himself, shaking his head slightly. "Doesn't matter. You saved the calf. That's what counts." Ayana gave a small smile, half amused, half understanding. "I know what I said," she replied. "You were distracted. It happens." She glanced toward little Rusty, now resting safely nearby. But there wasn't time to hesitate. It needed help, right then. Cole nodded slowly. He understood. Out here, hesitation could cost you, and he'd come closer than he liked to admitting. All his life, he'd trusted routine, experience, control, but tonight reminded him sometimes instinct mattered just as much, sometimes more, As the storm finally broke apart, the sky opened again, and out beyond the hills, a rainbow stretched wide across the fading clouds. Quiet, unexpected. A reminder that even the wildest storms didn't last forever. Cole and Ayanna stood there, side by side, watching it in silence. Both thinking. For Cole, something had changed. He had seen her, not just as a visitor, not just as someone passing through, but as someone strong, capable, unshaken. And he saw something else, too. How easy it was to be wrong. How quickly assumptions could lead a man off course. And how something unexpected, someone unexpected, could step into your life and leave a mark. For Ayanna, the night had carved its own lesson. She had faced real danger, acted without hesitation, trusted her instincts, and she'd held steady when it mattered most. It strengthened something in her, a quiet certainty she already carried. And she noticed it in him too. That shift, that recognition, the respect that hadn't been there before. Now was. Afterward, they worked in silence, resetting what the storm had broken, checking fences, drying tools. No need for many words. They both felt it. That shared weight, that shared victory. They had stood against the Black Ridge storm and held together. When night came again, they parted ways. Cole headed back to his cabin. Ayanna made her way toward Martha Boone's place, but neither of them left the night behind. It stayed with them, in the quiet, in the thoughts they couldn't quite shake. Cole sat alone later, thinking, not about the storm itself, but about something deeper, about how easy it was to misunderstand, how quickly a moment could be twisted by assumption, and how important it was to listen before deciding what something meant. Ayanna made her way back toward Martha Boone's place, her steps steady, but her mind far from quiet. Thoughts moved through her like a slow current. Courage, responsibility, trust. The storm had passed, but what it left behind hadn't faded. Not in her. Not in him. They both knew it, even without saying it out loud. What had happened that night wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of moment that settled deep, shaping how two people saw each other from that point forward. A night marked by instinct, by quick decisions, by words that almost went wrong, and by the weight those words carried. Somewhere beneath it all, something had shifted. Quietly, almost too subtle to name, but permanent all the same. The ranch had fallen still again, the Black Ridge storm now just a memory. But its lessons lingered, trailing behind them like dust in the wind, preparing them for what lay ahead. Because what came next wouldn't just ask for strength. It would demand patience, understanding, and the discipline to listen before judging. Morning came slow over Dry Creek land, wrapped in a fragile calm. The sun pushed through scattered gray clouds, casting pale light across wet earth and bent fence lines. Leaves clung heavy with moisture, glinting faintly like scattered glass in the early glow. Cole Maddox stepped out of his cabin, boots sinking slightly into the softened ground. The night had taken its toll, but the ranch had held. Every animal was alive. Every fence, though tested, still stood, and that brought a kind of satisfaction only a man in his line of work could truly understand. But his mind wouldn't settle. It kept circling back, to her, to that moment. Don't stop. Simple words, clear as day, and yet he'd gotten them wrong. For a split second, his thoughts had drifted somewhere they had no business going, twisting meaning where there was none. Cole exhaled sharply, shaking his head as a trace of embarrassment warmed his face. He'd always trusted his instincts, trusted his ability to read people, read situations. But last night proved something different. Even a man with years behind him could still get it wrong, especially when pressure closed in, especially when emotions got tangled in the middle of it all. He walked the fence line slowly, checking for damage, but his thoughts stayed elsewhere. On Ayanna. On the way she moved through the storm. Calm, focused, unshaken. She hadn't hesitated. Not once. And the truth hit him plain. He'd respected her long before that moment. He just hadn't stopped long enough to see it clearly. Too busy assuming, too quick to interpret. And in doing so, he'd nearly missed who she really was. Someone who could think sharp under pressure. Act without fear. Hold steady when everything else was breaking loose. Back at Martha Boone's place, Ayanna had cleaned up, changed into dry clothes. But the night hadn't left her either. Not even close. Something about it stayed with her. The storm had been fierce, that much was true. But what it revealed mattered more. Clarity, instinct, courage. She had acted without hesitation, guided by one thing: protecting life. Still, she couldn't ignore it. That moment. Cole's pause, the way his expression shifted. He had misunderstood her. She didn't take offense, not really, but she felt it. That small thread of tension left behind, unspoken, unresolved. All morning, she replayed it. The sound of the wind tearing across the land, the flash of lightning, the panic in little Rusty's cries, her own voice, firm, urgent. Don't stop. She remembered exactly what she meant, and she remembered the hesitation it caused. Now she understood why. In moments like that, people didn't always hear what was said. They heard what they felt. And sometimes, that made all the difference. Ayanna stood still for a long moment, then made up her mind. She wouldn't leave it hanging. Not because she had to, but because it mattered. What they had begun building, however small, was worth keeping clear, worth protecting. So she turned her gaze back toward the ranch. She would go back, not out of obligation, but to make sure he understood exactly what she meant, and exactly what she didn't. Ayanna carried no shame with her, only a quiet determination to mend what had nearly been misunderstood. What had taken root between them in the middle of the Black Ridge storm was too real, too rare to let it slip away over a single misread moment. By mid-afternoon, she was already back at the ranch. Cole Maddox was inside the barn, finishing what the storm had left behind. His shirt clung damp against his back, streaked with sweat, and his hands were still caked with dried mud from resetting broken fence posts. When he looked up and saw her walking in, something caught in his chest. Surprise, sure, but something else too. Relief. He hadn't expected her back so soon, but he'd hoped. "Ayanna," he called, his voice just a touch unsteady. "Didn't figure I'd see you again this quick." "I needed to explain something," she said, her tone calm but firm. She stepped carefully past the barn entrance, avoiding the puddles left from the storm. "Last night, when I said don't stop, I was talking about the calf," she continued. "Nothing else. It needed to be free, right then, to make it to safety, that's all." She paused, letting the words settle, making sure there was no room left for doubt. Cole exhaled slowly, a wave of relief washing through him, followed close behind by a flicker of embarrassment. He nodded. "Yeah, I figured that after," he admitted. "Truth is, I got it wrong. Let my head run ahead of me." He gave a small shake of his head. "Doesn't matter now. You were right. That calf needed help, and you made sure it got it." Ayanna offered a faint smile, catching the honesty in his voice. "I understand," she said. "Moments like that, things can get twisted, But what matters is, we acted. Her eyes shifted briefly toward the stalls. Little Rusty made it. That's what counts. Something in her words, clear, steady, grounded, struck him deeper than he expected. Cole had spent years valuing control, routine, certainty. But she reminded him of something just as important: clarity, and how easy it was to lose it when assumptions took over. He felt it then, plain and undeniable. Respect for her courage, her decisiveness, her ability to stay focused when everything else was falling apart. They didn't dwell on it any longer. Didn't need to. Instead, they got back to work. For the next hour, they moved across the ranch, checking fence lines, feeding the Maddox herd, fixing what the storm had bent but not broken. Side by side. No rush, no tension, just quiet understanding. The land still bore the marks of the storm, but it stood intact. And with every task they finished, there came a quiet sense of something earned, something shared. Cole couldn't help but notice how naturally Ayanna fell into the work. The way she handled rope, the way she moved through the gates, steady, confident, certain. She wasn't just brave, she was sharp, observant, willing to carry her share without hesitation. And that stayed with him. As they worked, Cole found his thoughts drifting again, not to the storm, but to what it had revealed. All his life, he'd studied land, weather, cattle. But people? That was something else entirely. Last night proved it. Misreading a single moment, just a few words, could shift everything, even when no harm was meant. It was a quiet lesson, but it hit deep. Ayanna, in her own way, was thinking just as much. She respected what she saw in him, his resilience, his experience, the way he stood his ground when things turned rough. And she understood something else, too. His mistake hadn't come from weakness or foolishness, just from being human. Because when pressure builds, even the clearest minds can falter. What mattered was what came after. And he had faced it, owned it, moved forward. That was enough. By the time the afternoon sun dipped lower, they found themselves standing once more on a small rise overlooking the ranch. The sky burned in shades of orange and pink. The air still carried the scent of rain and damp earth. Out in the distance, the Maddox herd moved slow and steady, their low calls drifting softly through the quiet. For a moment, everything stilled, like the land itself was taking a breath. Cole glanced over at her, something thoughtful settling in his expression. "You know," he said quietly, "I reckon last night taught me more than I expected. Not just about the ranch, but about people." He paused. "About not jumping to conclusions." Ayanna nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Yeah," she said softly. "And it showed me something too. Courage isn't just about what you do. It's about how clearly you see things, how you take responsibility." She met his gaze. Even in chaos, words matter. And what they mean matters even more. A quiet smile passed between them. No need for anything more. They both understood. The mistake had been small. But what came from it was something stronger, clearer, and real. As evening settled in, Cole Maddox offered Ayanna another simple meal inside the barn. They took their seats on rough wooden stools, sharing bread, cheese, and fresh-cut fruit beneath the soft glow of lantern light. The conversation came easy, natural as the wind across dry creek land. They started with the work, the fences, the herd, the way a storm could turn everything in a matter of minutes. But before long, the talk drifted deeper. Cole spoke of the years behind him, of hard seasons, of storms that had nearly taken everything, of lessons the land had carved into him, lessons no man forgot once he learned them. Ayana listened, then answered with stories of her own, of the Red Sky people, of the teachings passed down by the stone elders, and the quiet strength rooted in her Red Sky families. She spoke with calm certainty, guided by values that shaped every choice she made. Somewhere between those stories, something became clear to them both. They weren't just sharing words. They were learning each other. Cole began to see the depth of where she came from, the strength of her people, the clarity in the way she saw the world. And Ayana saw something just as steady in him, his commitment, his resilience, and the rare kind of strength it took to admit when you'd been wrong and grow from it. That night wasn't loud or dramatic, but it mattered. It was built on respect, on understanding, on something quiet but real. Later, as Ayana moved toward the barn door, she paused. "Thank you," she said softly, meeting his eyes, "for letting me help, for listening, and for understanding." Cole gave a small nod, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "No," he said. "Thank you, Ayana, for showing me that even when everything's falling apart, clarity and courage still matter." He paused a beat. "And for reminding me a man can get things wrong, even when he thinks he's paying attention." Ayana smiled, a quiet sense of peace settling in her chest. Then she turned and followed the trail back toward Martha Boone's place, the evening air cool around her. And she knew something had changed. It wasn't romance, and it wasn't something simple either. It was deeper than that, a shared understanding, a recognition of strength, of patience, of the weight words carried and the importance of getting them right. That night, beneath the open sky, both lay awake in their own spaces, thinking. Cole turned the moment over in his mind, the misreading, the humility it demanded, and the respect it had left behind. Ayana reflected on something just as important, the power of clarity, the strength in acting without hesitation, and the quiet bonds that formed when people stood together through something real. The storm was gone, but its imprint remained. They both understood it now. That night had changed something, not just between them, but within them. What had started as a simple misunderstanding had become something else entirely. A lesson, a turning point, a foundation built on respect. The days that followed returned to routine. Work resumed. Life moved forward. But neither of them forgot. The memory of that storm stayed sharp, etched into everything they did. It had shown them what courage looked like, how easily people could misjudge, and how much it mattered to understand before deciding. Out on the ranch, time settled back into its steady rhythm. The ground still held the damp scent of rain. Morning after morning, Cole worked the fences, fed the Maddox herd, and repaired what little damage the storm had left behind. The cattle moved easy now, calm, steady, proof of what had been protected. Even the land itself seemed lighter, as if it had breathed through the storm and come out stronger. And Ayana kept coming back, day after day. Each time she stepped onto the ranch, Cole felt it, that quiet shift inside him. Not tension, that had faded. Something else. Curiosity, anticipation. He never said it out loud, but he noticed it, and he knew whatever had started that night wasn't over yet. Instead, something softer took its place. Ease. A quiet, growing trust that settled between them, making even the hardest work feel lighter beneath the relentless heat of the sun. The ranch itself felt different now, not just because of the storm that had passed, but because of what they had been through together. Something had tied them to this place, and to each other. Cole found himself watching Ayanna more closely. Not in a way that felt intrusive, just aware. He noticed the small things now. The way she tightened a rope with just enough force to hold, never more. The steady calm in her hands when she worked with the Maddox herd. The softness in her voice when she spoke to the younger calves. Quiet, patient, reassuring. It wasn't just skill, it was understanding. And what struck him most wasn't her ability, it was her humility. She never asked for recognition, never looked for approval. She worked because it needed to be done, because it was right. One afternoon, when the heat settled heavy across dry creek land, Cole nodded towards the edge of the property. "Come on," he said. "Let's take a break." They made their way down to the creek that ran along the far side of the ranch. The storm had swollen it, and the water moved faster now, slipping over stones with a steady, restless rhythm. They sat on a cluster of rocks, boots hanging just above the cool current. For a while, neither spoke. Just the sound of water moving. Then Cole exhaled slowly. "You know," he said, voice low, thoughtful. "That night, it stuck with me." He paused, eyes fixed on the water. "Life doesn't always go the way you figure it will. And sometimes, the way you read a person, it ain't right." He glanced over at her. "But that doesn't make it a waste. If anything, it teaches you something, if you're willing to pay attention." Ayanna nodded, watching the water ripple and twist around the rocks. "Yeah," she said softly, "and it taught me something too. Courage isn't just about standing in front of danger." She looked out across the current. "It's about seeing clearly, understanding what's really happening, acting when it matters." She paused, then added, "People judge too fast sometimes. They miss what's right in front of them. But if you slow down, if you really listen, things start to make sense." Cole smiled faintly. She had a way of saying things plain. But they stayed with you. He realized then. The storm hadn't just been about survival. It had been about something else entirely. Connection. Understanding. The ability to look past your first instinct and see what was actually there. And that was something he meant to carry with him. Not just with her, but with anyone he crossed paths with. Weeks passed, and what had started in the middle of chaos quietly grew into something steady. They worked side by side, fixing fences, tending the Maddox herd, keeping the ranch running day after day. There was no strain between them, no hesitation, just rhythm, built on respect, on trust, on a shared memory neither of them forgot. Cole noticed the change in himself. He slowed down more, thought before he spoke, listened, really listened, instead of assuming he already knew. Not just with Ayanna, with everyone, and it made a difference. Ayanna felt it too. She had always trusted herself, but now that trust ran deeper, the storm had shown her something real. That clarity mattered. That calm thinking could shape outcomes. That courage wasn't loud, it was precise. And that when action came with understanding, it carried weight. It strengthened her, grounded her. One evening, as the sun dropped low behind the distant hills, they found themselves standing near the barn again. The sky stretched wide in shades of orange, pink, and violet. The air was still, carrying the scent of dry grass and earth. Out in the fields, the Maddox herd rested easy. Everything felt at peace. Cole glanced toward her, something reflective settling in his expression. "You know," he said quietly, "that night didn't just change what happened to that calf." He paused. "It changed me." His voice stayed steady. "Made me see things different. Taught me something about humility, about patience." He looked out across the land. "And about taking a second before deciding what something means." He let out a slow breath. Funny thing is, I figured my life was already set. Same routine, same ground. But turns out, something unexpected can still come along and change things. Ayanna smiled, understanding him without needing more words. People aren't always what they seem at first, she said. Strength, wisdom, even kindness. Sometimes they show up when you don't expect them. She met his eyes. That's why it matters to pay attention, to act, but also to understand. A quiet silence followed. Not empty, but full. Because they both knew what they had found out here was something worth holding on to. They stood there a while in silence, watching the last of the daylight slip behind the hills. Neither spoke, but both were thinking the same thing: how far things had come since that night the Black Ridge storm tore through the land. What had started as fear, confusion, even tension, had turned into something else entirely: respect, understanding, and a bond that didn't need to be spoken out loud to be real. They had faced uncertainty together, faced a moment where words nearly went wrong, and found their way through it anyway. And in doing so, they had both changed, not just beside each other, but within themselves. Days rolled into weeks, and life on the ranch settled back into its steady rhythm. Cole Maddox and Ayanna worked side by side, day after day. No rush, no strain, just quiet consistency, a reflection of everything they had learned. The victories were small: a fence line repaired clean and strong, a newborn calf standing steady on its legs, a passing storm that came and went without leaving damage behind. Simple things, but they meant more now, because each one carried the weight of what they had been through together. One afternoon, Cole called her over near the edge of the property. "I've been thinking," he said, nodding toward an open stretch of land. "Could use a better enclosure for the younger stock." They got to work right there, measuring distances, marking out lines, talking through materials and structure. Ayanna offered ideas without hesitation. Practical, grounded in what she had seen during the storm, where the wind hit hardest, where the ground softened too quickly. Cole listened, and more than that, he valued it. What they built that day wasn't just a plan, it was proof of trust, of respect, of how well they worked together now. As they worked, something settled in Cole's mind. That storm hadn't just been a test, it had been a turning point, a reminder that even a life built on routine could still hold surprises, ones that mattered. Ayanna had brought something into his world he hadn't expected: clarity, perspective, a different way of seeing things. And instead of pushing it away, he had learned to accept it, to learn from it. For Ayanna, the experience had done something just as strong. It reinforced what she already carried inside: confidence, self-reliance. But it also taught her something new, that even when you act with certainty, your words still matter. That clarity wasn't optional, it was necessary. The memory of that moment, when Cole misunderstood her, no longer lingered as something awkward. It had changed. Now it stood as a reminder of what they had learned, and what they had built from it. As the sun dipped low again, casting a warm glow across dry creek land, they paused once more. The ranch was quiet. The Maddox herd rested out in the fields. Wind moved soft through the trees. Birds called as they settled for the night. Everything felt right. They both knew it. Life would never stay easy forever. There would be more storms, more uncertainty, more moments that tested them. But now, they also knew something else. That with patience, with clarity, with the willingness to truly listen, they could face whatever came. That night, as Cole settled in, his thoughts drifted back over the past weeks. The storm, the words, the mistake, and everything that came after. It had taught him something simple, but powerful. Assumptions could lead a man wrong, but communication, patience, and the courage to admit it, that was what set things right. He felt something close to gratitude, for the lesson, for the change, for her. Across the way, Ayana lay awake for a while, too, thinking about everything they had walked through, not just the work, but the growth. She understood something more clearly now. Courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was about speaking clearly, acting with purpose, and choosing to understand before judging. The days that followed only deepened what had already begun. They worked together, laughed when the work allowed it, shared stories in the quiet hours, and little by little, what had once been just a place of routine and solitude for Cole became something more, a place of connection, of change, of possibility. One afternoon, as the light stretched long across the land, Cole looked over at her, thoughtful, almost distant for a moment. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking." He let out a slow breath. "Storms, they ain't just trouble." He glanced out across the horizon. "They're lessons." "And sometimes," Cole added, his voice low and steady, "they bring people together in ways you never see coming." Ayana gave a small nod, the golden light of the afternoon catching in her eyes. "Yeah," she said softly. "And they remind us to pay attention, to act with clarity, and to value understanding for what it really is." She let her gaze drift across dry creek land. "Life's full of moments like that. You just have to be willing to learn from them." A quiet smile passed between them. Not forced, not spoken, just understood. A recognition of everything they had been through, everything they had gained. The storm had long since passed. But what it left behind stayed. A few misread words had turned into something clearer. Fear had given way to courage. And one hard night had shaped something lasting between them. They had both changed, on their own, and together, learning that sometimes the moments you never expect bring the most meaning. Evening settled gently over the ranch. The sky stretched wide in shades of gold and pink, soft light spilling across the fields where the Maddox herd grazed in quiet peace. The fences stood strong, the land steady once more, and the wind moved slow through the trees like a whisper that no longer carried warning. Cole Maddox and Ayana stood in that calm, knowing something simple. That night would stay with them, always. It had changed how they saw each other, how they faced the unknown, how they understood the weight of words, and the strength it took to use them right. It reminded them that even in the most ordinary places, something extraordinary could take hold, and life went on, as it always does. The herd moved, the fences held, the days came and went, but now there was more in them. Cole and Ayana worked side by side, shared quiet laughs between long hours, faced each new day with something they hadn't carried before. A deeper understanding of themselves and of each other. The storm had tested them, but it had done more than that. It had brought them together, made them stronger, sharper, more aware, more connected. And under the wide desert sky, as night settled deep and the stars burned bright above, they both felt it, that quiet sense of peace, of something settled, something earned. They knew more storms would come, that misunderstandings were part of life, that nothing out here or anywhere was ever fully certain. But they also knew this, with clarity, with courage, with the willingness to truly listen. They could face whatever came, and in that knowing, they found more than just stability. They found trust, respect, and something lasting enough to carry them through any storm still waiting on the horizon.